Hi there everyone, thought I'd do a little video and show you how to fit these Barkbusters to a GSA. These have got the extended little pads in them for wind deflection and the side sliders. Black powder coated bars. So I thought I'd do a little video and show you how to do the fittings. I've done the left hand side, now it's time for the right hand side. So first of all you've got to remove the old handguards, and you've got one bolt in the end here and then one little bolt here in the front. These are aftermarket. These are extended handguards, just cheap ones. And this is a torque setting in the original bike, and this end one's a T50, and I believe this one's a T15 in the original piece. So let's get to taking it off. So once you've removed the handguard, you're left with this situation. You've got this piece of plastic that goes underneath your mirror, so you need to crack your mirror bolts, take your mirror off, and then this lifts off. So we'll do that next. For your mirrors you'll need 14mm spanner, 2 of them if you have them. You're going to hold the bottom, crack the top, just like that, and your mirror will then unscrew. You might have to put it into lock one way so you don't hit the screen, especially if you've got the big screen on. One mirror, put that down somewhere so it can't fall off the brick. And then this bit, again, unscrews. It's best to use a ring end of your spanner because these are quite tight, especially if they've been done at factory. And you're going to unscrew that, and it's got a little plastic ring underneath, so make sure you keep the plastic ring on it, and then the cowling will lift up and move out the way for you. And then, just so you don't forget, put that back in, and once it's in, give it a little nip, again with the ring end so you don't round it. Just like that. Make sure you get that plastic ring sort of central, and you'll see that little white, just a little nip on there. That's nice and tight, it's not going anywhere. So we're going to leave the mirror out for the time being because we've actually got to release this nut at this side, which I'll show you. So just before we build up the other side, I thought it'd be worth showing you what you actually get in a kit. Obviously I've built up one side already, so this is the right hand side. Now in the kit you get the bars, which are sided, and you'll see that it flares up at one side. So that one is going to be the right. You get your main panel, which is your Barkbuster. In this particular set you get the wind deflector, which you can have in a couple of varying positions. So as you can see on the back of there, you've got these 4 holes, and that can either be in the high position or you can have it slightly lower, so from the other side it's a little bit of a flare, or the higher position gives it more wind deflection. You'll see that on the inside of these particular panels they are listed as right and left, so that makes it a bit easier. These are an extra, so these are sliders for the side of these bars. So when you're putting this bar together, the end that goes into the end of the handlebar slots through the hole. Which way is it? It is that way, yep. So goes through the end of the hole of the bar like that, wraps around, and then it'll secure to the securing point on the bar. Now these bars already have pre-drilled holes, which is what the screws are for, and this particular extra fits over the top of the actual buster itself. So when that sits on there with the holes lined up, this corner sits over the top and your bolt goes through, so it all blends in nicely, and these are just to protect the actual bars getting scratched. The bar actually runs in a channel in the plastics, so if we take all this back off, you'll see that inside the bar itself you've got this plasticky foam sort of insert. It's not very grippy, it's just another bit of plastic I believe. Oh, there you are. And this one has an R symbol for the right hand side as well. Okay, now you also get a load of screws. So these ones are slightly longer and they don't have a point on the end. These ones are to secure this plastic to the Barkbuster, so it goes through the outer side and then into these sort of channels depending on which height you wish. Right, then you get So with the actual Barkbusters, if you didn't opt for the side sliders, you get 2 tiny screws, and these 2 tiny screws hold this piece to the actual bar. So these don't really offer you much protection other than from the wind. The bar itself is the main protection, what you're looking for on the bike. Now, if you get the side pieces, because you're adding this much plastic to the outside of the original plastics, so over the top like so, you need a slightly longer screw. So that comes with some screws that are slightly longer, and then what you do is you use one of the small ones for the side that doesn't have it, which would be this end, and then the longer one which goes through this panel, the side piece, then the main panel into the bar. Okay, and that's what you get in a pack, and obviously it's the very same for the other side. Now, the only other piece we haven't spoke about is the actual handlebar mount. So again, these are sided, you can see it's offset, and the way it sits on the bike is it goes, so right hand, it sits like this with the flare pointing the windscreen, and that's because as the bar sits round, you'll see it's got a slight bend in it. So if you was to hold that piece to where it bolts, it actually aligns in a straight line through your handlebar, which gives you the protection on the actual edge where you want it. So when you're fitting these, it's just a case of, you can see there's like a, it can't be the wrong way around. It's this piece goes under the handlebar, and these 2 pieces face the rider of the actual bike. And the way it tells you to fit these to the bike is to secure these 2 together loosely, get this on the bike, and then put the main bolt through, which you get in the pack. And then as you tighten up the main bolt, which is this one, which goes through there, you then have the other bolt, which is an Allen key with a chamfered head, and that sits on the outside. You can see that this end is chamfered, so that obviously sits in there, and as you tighten it, it sits flush. Now, you also get this little spacer, which sits on the inside of that, like so, and this piece goes through the original outset of your handlebar, and I'll show you that whilst I'm fitting it. Oops. So that's what you get in the set for some Barkbusters with optional side sliders. These are about £15, and I think these are a bit cheaper to replace than these bars. So this full kit was £147. Doesn't matter what colour you go for, there's loads of colour variants. I got mine from the Adventure Bike Rider Festival 2023 from a Bike Thing, which was a stall that was up there. They've been very reasonable, free delivery to my house. They had loads on stock, unfortunately didn't have the ones for mine. And I've just ordered some for my girlfriend's bike, so I've got them to fit when they arrive. And you don't pay any difference for the plastic, so these come in various colours. For instance, this can be a different colour as well. The only extra you pay for is these side pieces. Now, the only other thing to mention was that these bars, these ones you can see are powder coated in black. Now, as a rule, these are silver, and I think that's just because for cheap, to be fair. But the only company I've found that do them in powder coated black is a Bike Thing. So if you wanted powder coated black ones, head over to a Bike Thing and see what you think. Right, let's get this built up. And there you have it, built up Barkbuster. So I've put these in the higher positions. You'll see there's 2 lugs down the bottom, and they're just screwed in nice and loose really. There's no movement in there. It's plastic into plastic, so just be careful you don't go through. So when they're all fit, a bit of a polish up required, like, because I've got grubby hands, but ultimately from the inside and then from the outside you'll see it nice and shiny, hopefully. But you'll see this screw here goes through the 2 pieces of plastic and then into the bar, which holds this side curtain on. And then this side you get a fatter head, which covers the entire hole and obviously goes straight through that bit of plastic and into there. And it is a smaller screw in this side. Obviously it's only going to go in that much. I don't know if you can see that. Whereas at the other side there's a lot more for it to get through, hence you get the bigger screw in the kit with the side sliders. Right, so let's move on to getting it on the bike, and let's go through this piece and what you have to do to the bike to get this piece on. It can be quite tricky given the shape, and I'll show you where it sits. So it's easier to show you where they sit because I've already built this side. So this is one that's fitted and fixed now to the bike, and you can see this end goes through into the bar that we've just seen, fits into the end of your crash bar, well, your handlebar, sorry, this becomes your crash bar. But where it sits on the inside of your mirrors, and the gap between the brake clutch reservoir, sorry, is quite tight. So you've got to get this piece in there. In order to do that on this side, you have to take out this screw, and this cover comes off, revealing two bolts that hold the mirror arm on and the actual clutch lever. Once you've got that loosened, you can twist this piece down, and then this piece will actually slot in from this side and go over. Similarly on this side, you've obviously got the same sort of setup, so you're going to have to undo this bolt. This front piece, which is your SOS switch on my bike, if you haven't got it, then it should just be a cap. This piece comes off and dangles down, and then we've got to get the actual arm, got to get this piece in there next to the SOS switch. So again, these sit on the inside of your mirrors. Okay, that's how we go. You can actually see it on the camera, but on this particular piece it says 8 Newton meters. So when you're tightening this back up, it's not really tight, 8 Newton meters. It's nice and loose. So we're just going to crack these two off. Don't have to take them out, just crack them off so that we can get this full system swinging around like so. And then obviously once it's moving, because these don't move as a rule, it does leave a mark on the handlebar where it's been. So it's good just to get that back in the position where it's come from, to make sure we can actually get it in the right place when we come to put it back together. Just looking at this handlebar mount, you can see it flicks out, and when this piece is off, you can see that the shapes align with the squared off edge. So it sits over the handlebar like so, it slots into place like that. And you also get two bolts. You get one that's longer in length, which goes through the bottom, and then a shorter one, same thread, same tool required for the top because it's shorter. So make sure you don't get them two mixed up, put them in a safe place. And what we have to do is, it's this piece that can be quite tricky. So as you can see, it needs to sit behind the brake reservoir, and it doesn't actually go in regardless of which way you sort of tip it in. So what you've got to do is you've got to wiggle this and slide this actually up the handlebar. So as you wiggle this, there's a little bit of room for you to, there you go, look, and then it wiggles into place. And that's just because that's loose, and it allowed me to get past the actual brake line itself. So you give yourself enough room just to get that in. Now, because you don't know where the position of this is going to end up, when we come to put the bar on, we tighten up this end first, which pushes the whole handlebar to its natural position, and then this one will vary. So at this point we can get these two bolts connected, get them pieces just loose on there for now so that it's hardened in there, and then that sits through the front like that, and just make sure that your cables that run underneath are on the underside of it like so. So your cables will all run there and nothing's going to get trapped. Okay, so let's get it mounted. So once that's loosely tightened, nice and loose on there, leave these bolts loose. You can see they're just in there, you don't want to cross thread these, so just leave them in and let this dangle for the time being. And that's because we've got to sort the outer side off first, and then this will slide to its position where it's best held, and then you can tighten these two at last. So let's get the Barkbuster out and get it fitted. So for the time being, don't worry too much about this side. What we're going to do is we're going to focus on the outside. So when you actually take off your bar, you get this piece on the inside which goes back into position, and then the little silver ring we discussed sits on the inside of the original piece, like so, and that all sits on the end of the bar, and then the Barkbuster sits over the top. Now, for ease, if you put the new bolt you get with your Barkbusters in the handlebar end, put it through your two pieces, like so, you can get that lined up with all the pieces there you need to, and then just screw that loosely in until it's finger tight, and you'll see that it's going to try and find its natural position against this one we've just fitted, and it's just a case of getting this one nice and tight, well, enough so that it ain't going to flop about too much. And because you've loosened this section, this is still going to twist, so make sure that you get it back into the position where you're comfortable. And then the idea is that this bar runs aligned to your brake lever on this side and your clutch lever on the other side, and then that's where your maximum protection is going to be. So once you get that somewhere near, you can get your tools required to tighten it up. In this case, it's a 6mm Allen key, and just get it to a point where you're happy enough to still be able to move it if need be, so don't do it too tight, and just hold it in position. And then at this point you can set the right angle for the bars, and for that you just need to get on there and see what feels right. So for me, it's about there, which don't feel a million miles away. And then you can tighten up the two bolts in the mirror stem, which are 8N, so don't go mad on them. You only need a little nip. And then once you get them somewhere near, just double check, make sure that it is tight enough for you. Give them a little nip, so get them in. Little nip. And then that's not going to move anywhere, so that's probably the right position. You may find after riding you need to readjust this, just because you've messed with it and it might not be just at the right position, and in actual fact that feels like it's dropped a little bit, so I'm just going to crack that off again and give it just a little nudge up. Yeah, that feels a lot better. And then again, tightening them, not too tight, you don't want to break them in there because it'll be an expensive repair. Just a little nip so you know that it's not going anywhere. Okay, now this is all in position, you can then lift this one up and down, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to align your brake lever with the inside of this bar, and then you can actually go ahead and tighten this end piece, and for that you will also need a 6mm Allen key. So if you just hold it from the underside, aligning your brake lever to the actual inside of the Barkbuster itself, and then just give that just a little bit of tightness, and that should be in a nice position aligned, and I'll show you from this side shortly. Now this is all set, you can actually get this bar in. So this piece itself obviously runs on the inside, so on this side of it, and what's best to do at this point is to just give it a screw your bolt in, which is your elongated bolt, sits in the hole. Do it with your fingers, don't do this with a tool. Make sure you've got the threads right, because if you cross thread that it might be a bit of a problem for you. And then at this point you can actually tighten that one up as well, and for that you'll need a 5mm Allen key, and you're just going to give that just enough for the time being just to hold it in place, and then you'll feel that it sits flush, and then it's just a case of a little nip like so. And then what we can do is we can actually come around the back and tighten these two up, which only a 4mm Allen key. Let's tighten these two up, so I'll show you that from the other side. So once we've got the front all fitted, and we've tightened up the bolt at the other side of this stem, and we've tightened up the end of the handlebar at this side, we can then go ahead and tighten these two, because that's now in its natural position. And for that we'll need the 4mm Allen key. And these aren't very tight, it's just a case of nipping them up, getting them into a nice even tightness. You can see that these start to close up, and then at some point you'll actually feel it grab, which is just there. So get them tightened down by hand, nice and easy, It's easier to go up, down, up, down, up, down, or down, up, down, up, down, up. Don't matter. Just don't tighten one up without tightening the other, because you'll see that they're both pulling in on a circle. So both sides need to be equally adjusted. And you'll feel that as you tighten it, you'll find one gets tight, one doesn't. And that's because it's not quite seated properly on the handlebar. So keep going back and forth. And you'll see this gap close up and close up. And then when they get to a point where they feel equal, it's good just to give them a nip. Like so, don't need to be too tight. You don't really want to round these, they're a pain in the bum if they break. And if they are rounded, it's going to be a removal job. So just give them a nip, and then you can get rid of them tools, and then we can have a look at the actual setup. So a good test to see if they're aligned is just put your handlebars level and just see if these sit horizontally, which they do in this case, and then just remember you've got to put your mirror back on. Okay. A little insight as to what it looks like from the inside. So this bar, which is your Barkbuster, when on the inside, you want your lever to align with that. Because if you are going to drop it, it's going to hit here, not snapping your levers. Likewise on the clutch side, you want it to align, which it does. And that's it, Barkbusters fitted. They do look good, look a little bit meaner, makes it look like a bit like a crosser vibe. From motocross, yeah, like them. So in the pack you actually do get some instructions which show you an indication of how these sit, so you can see it's tapered in towards the windscreen. This is the left hand side. Shows you where your bolts go, nice and easy to follow. And then down here it also gives you the sequence as to how you should fit them. So obviously it's number 6 first, 7, 4, 5, okay. And it does give you 2 illustrations of where they sit. So right hand side you can see it sits on the inside of your mirror stem, on the left hand side it sits on the inside of your mirror stem. And if you flip the page over, it gives you an idea of the pieces that are in there. Oops, upside down. The pieces that are in there in the full kit, and it also gives you the torque settings. So you can see none of them are mega tight, just tight enough. Take note of your cautions and your warnings just to make sure. Barkbusters.